the legendary hero Methuselah, holding the Sword of Flames, rescued the angel imprisoned in stone from the hands of the ruthless humans. From that moment, the stone creatures, who were outnumbered, found refuge under the protection of Methuselah, a descendant of Seth. This scorched earth became a forbidden zone where any human daring to step foot would face death. Before the end of the world, the stone creatures and humans waged a brutal war, all to protect a man named Noah. Because Noah, guided by a divine message in a dream, was told that soon, the world would be submerged by a great flood. This natural disaster would spare no one. Every human, and even every animal on earth, would perish. Furthermore, God gave Noah a mission in his dream. He was to build an ark before the end of the world, to save all species on earth. However, to preserve the diversity of life, only one male and one female of each species could board the ark to escape the coming disaster. But why did God decide to destroy humanity? According to legend, after God created heaven and earth in 7 days, he breathed his life into a body made of dust. Thus, Adam was created, but although he lived in the magnificent Garden of Eden, he soon found himself lonely. So, God took one of Adam's ribs and created a woman, naming her Eve. God gave them a choice, to follow the temptation of darkness or embrace the blessing of light. From then on, Adam and Eve lived freely and without worry, guarding the Garden of Eden. But one day, a serpent representing sin tempted Eve, and out of greed, they both ate from the forbidden fruit. Thus, they lost their innocence. In his anger, God expelled Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. Afterward, the two of them built a home on barren land, and soon they had 3 sons, Cain, Abel, and Seth. But hatred and quarrels soon led to a rift between the brothers. Cain killed his brother Abel and fled to the east. After that, the descendants of Cain and Seth continued their lines in the world. The kind angels, unwilling to see humanity suffer, wanted to help these creatures who resembled God in appearance. To do so, they descended to earth, defying God's will. As soon as they touched the ground, they were punished by God. Their bodies, once glowing with golden light, were now encased in stone and mud, transforming them into hideous stone creatures. Even so, they passed on all their knowledge to humanity, and with their help, human civilization developed rapidly. The descendants of Cain, with the support of the fallen angels, quickly built a great industrial civilization, but those who were accustomed to darkness could hardly accept the light. Although the descendants of Cain created civilization, evil spread throughout their cities. Humanity began to kill one another, and as their ambitions grew, this evil soon consumed the world. Resources were depleted, and the earth lost its vitality. In the end, only the descendants of Seth, the righteous line, continued to defend and protect God's creation. They upheld God's purity and goodness, hoping to gain his protection, but due to harsh living conditions and the oppression of the descendants of Cain, the situation of Seth's descendants became increasingly dangerous, and soon only one descendant remained. Young Noah, still unaware of the full extent of the world, witnessed the descendants of Cain march boldly onto his family's land, driven by greed for treasures and natural resources. Noah's father was brutally killed by the leader of the invading group as he tried to stop them. Hidden in the shadows, Noah witnessed the entire event, but instead of rushing out for revenge, he chose to flee the scene. This was because his father had always told him that there were things more important than revenge. Noah fled to an unfamiliar place, where he hid for over a decade. He transformed from a lone young boy into the head of a 5-member family. He never forgot his father's teachings and placed great importance on educating his children. Even when his eldest son picked a small white flower simply because it was beautiful, Noah took the time to give a thoughtful lesson. Although his son didn't fully understand the deep meaning of his words, he still nodded, albeit confused. However, just as he turned to leave, a drop of water suddenly fell from the sky and landed in front of Noah. What was once barren soil suddenly sprouted a small white flower. Noah's expression grew serious because he knew that such a thing could only be done by divine power. But strange events didn't stop there. Just as Noah was about to leave with his children, a sudden, painful cry echoed through the silent wilderness. Looking closely, Noah saw that the cry came from an injured pangolin, from the arrow lodged in its side. Noah could tell that humans were likely pursuing it. He quickly told his 2 children to hide and ran towards the pangolin. Unfortunately, the pangolin's wounds were too severe, and despite his efforts, Noah couldn't save it. Just then, several hunters appeared behind Noah, thinking he was trying to take the animal's food. Seeing that the hunters outnumbered him, Noah knew he couldn't avoid conflict. As the hunters were distracted, Noah quietly pulled the arrow from the pangolin's body and clenched it in his hand. The hunters attacked first, but Noah easily neutralized their efforts. In less than a minute, the hunters who had come with ill intent were lying motionless on the ground, unable to move. By the time everything was done, it was fully dark. Noah returned home with his children. That night, he told his wife everything that had happened that day. He was worried about the effect the events might have on his eldest son, but his wife comforted him, saying that their eldest son was slowly beginning to understand, and that many things, whether he wanted to or not, he would have to face. Perhaps what had happened today was a good omen for him. Noah felt that he had been overworried, and with his wife's gentle caress, he slowly drifted off to sleep. But this sleep would not be peaceful. In Noah's dream, he saw the message left by his grandfather, Methuselah, and the blood stained by sin beneath his feet. Suddenly, a small white flower bloomed in front of him. Before Noah could react, he found himself submerged in water, surrounded by countless floating corpses. The terrifying scene pulled Noah back to reality. After waking up, he told his wife, because of humanity's overwhelming sin, God had decided to destroy the world with a flood. To protect his wife and young children, Noah decided to embark on a journey with his family to find his reclusive grandfather, Methuselah, who lived on the sacred mountain. However, his wife was deeply worried, especially since their children were still young. Moreover, all of this was just Noah's deduction based on a dream, with no concrete evidence. She considered finding a safe place to hide, hoping to escape the disaster. Noah, however, remained firm in his belief that when the flood arrived, no place would be safe. In the end, his wife couldn't argue further. The family quickly packed their belongings and set out on the long and dangerous journey to avoid unnecessary trouble. Noah made every effort to steer clear of cities and densely populated areas along the way. After an unknown amount of time, they arrived at an abandoned mine. As it was the only route, they had no choice but to pass through the mine. After walking a few steps, they saw the bodies of many people scattered around the ground. Clearly, these victims had been robbed and brutally killed. While Noah's family mourned, they suddenly heard a faint cry for help. Following the sound, they found a badly injured young girl, Isla. Noah's wife was preparing to tend to her wounds when, unexpectedly, the robbers returned. Seeing a group of people rushing toward them from the nearby hill, Noah realized the danger and immediately picked up Isla, running away as fast as he could. However, when they reached the top of a hill, they discovered that the area ahead was the territory of the stone giants. The distinct difference in soil color marked the strong territorial claim of the giants. But with the robbers closing in, Noah had no other choice but to lead his family and Isla into the giants' territory. Some unaware robbers also followed them, ignoring the risks. The next moment, a giant made entirely of stone appeared behind Noah. The robbers were so terrified that they fled in panic. But Noah didn't fare much better. He was knocked unconscious and thrown into a mine shaft. Fortunately, his wife and children were unharmed. When Noah woke up, he looked at the piles of bones and pondered how to escape. At that moment, the stone giants appeared above the mine shaft. Noah tried to communicate with them, but the outcome was less than successful. The giants were not interested in participating in the conflicts of humanity. Noah had no choice but to wait quietly for another opportunity. Soon, night fell, and his wife and children quickly fell asleep. Only Noah, burdened with worries, and Isla, who couldn't sleep due to the pain from her injuries, stayed awake and talked in the darkness. To help Isla shift her attention, Noah sang the lullaby his father used to sing to him when he was a child. After Isla finally fell asleep, Noah learned from his wife that because of the location of her wounds, Isla might never be able to have children. Just then, a noise came from behind Noah and his wife. Noah quickly stood up to investigate, and from the darkness, a stone giant emerged. Although they all looked similar, Noah immediately recognized that this giant was the one who had been less hostile toward him earlier in the day. The stone giant led Noah's family out of the mine shaft and helped them leave the area. His eldest son, still curious about the situation, asked why this stone giant would take the risk of helping them, especially after the events earlier. Taking the opportunity to explain, the stone giant shared the history of his kind. It turned out they were the fallen angels who had helped the descendants of Cain build their great civilization. Before they took on their stone forms, they had been beings of light, representing hope. When Adam and Eve were tempted by the serpent and ate the fruit known as the fruit of knowledge, they were cast out of the Garden of Eden by God. The angels, sympathizing with the couple, chose to fall to earth to help them bear children and build civilization. But soon, God discovered their betrayal and imposed the severest punishment. The stone giant told Noah that they had once begged God for forgiveness, hoping to return to their original home, but their pleas were always met with disappointment and silence. This was why the stone giant had shown hostility when communicating with Noah and his family earlier. In his eyes, humanity had ruined the world, and thus, they deserved no kindness. Noah, hearing this, felt deeply conflicted. After all, humanity had indeed committed many sins. Afterward, under the stone giant's guidance, the group quickly arrived at the mountain that Noah had seen in his dream. They settled Isla and the rest of the family at the base of the mountain. After asking the stone giant to protect them, Noah took his eldest son and climbed to the summit. In an open cave, Noah met his grandfather, Methuselah. Time had taken its toll on Methuselah, leaving his hair graying and his face lined with age. Although a little disoriented, Noah immediately introduced his son to the elderly man. Bloodline is a powerful thing, though he had never met the man before. Noah's son showed no fear, listening to his father's instructions. The boy stepped forward and told his great-grandfather his name. Methuselah was pleased with the child, and after a brief exchange, he used divine power to make Shem fall asleep. He had something more important to tell Noah. He said that his father had once told him that if humanity continued to destroy the world, God would destroy them. Noah asked, "Is there no way to change this?" The answer, of course, was no. Since God had guided Noah here, it meant that no matter what he did, he could not avoid or stop the coming disaster. As Noah thought about the world's impending destruction, with many lives forced to end, he desperately wished to find a sliver of hope to change things. Luckily, things had not yet reached a hopeless state. With his grandfather Methuselah's reminder, Noah began to recall the dream he had. This time, besides the floating corpses, he also saw a huge ark, and after the ark appeared, those who were supposed to die found themselves revived. With this realization, Noah awoke from the dream. He now understood God's hint and the mission he was to undertake. Seeing that Noah had understood the dream, Methuselah gave him a seed. This seed was special because it was the first one to be taken from the Garden of Eden. Time together was always brief. After receiving his grandfather's hopes, Noah, with his eldest son and the seed, reunited with his wife at the foot of the mountain. After sharing the conversation with his grandfather, Noah solemnly declared that since the disaster that would destroy the world could not be avoided, he would carry out God's command to build a huge ark that could sail through the storm to protect his family and the innocent animals before the flood arrived. Noah stepped out of the tent, dug a shallow pit, and planted the seed his grandfather had given him. The next morning, Noah was awakened by the sound of shouting. When he stepped out of the tent, he found that the stone giants who had helped his family escape the mine the day before had arrived. Because they had helped Noah's family, the stone giants were being dragged away by their kin, labeled as traitors, and were about to face punishment. Noah quickly intervened and explained the scene from his dream, hoping to get their help. At first, the giant named Samyaza didn't believe Noah's talk of disaster. Instead, he thought Noah was the serpent representing sin. He was about to take action when suddenly, the spot where Noah had buried the seed the night before erupted into a spring of water. The water started spreading outward, and wherever it touched, towering trees grew instantly, transforming the barren, infertile land into a lush, green forest in less than a minute. Green, the color of hope and life, was now the material Noah would use to build the ark. Seeing this, the stone giants decided to join Noah's cause and began helping him. As days passed, the spring continued to flow farther and farther. Following the source of the spring, Noah found a group of stone giants working together in the depths of the forest near the mountain base. With their combined efforts, the construction of the ark neared completion. During this time, Noah's eldest son and Isla, the girl who had been saved, slowly developed a romantic relationship. One day, a large group of reptiles was suddenly summoned and poured out from the forest, heading towards the wooden structure Noah had built. This was the legendary Noah's Ark. Soon after, countless birds appeared in the sky, circling around the ark, followed by mammals arriving in pairs. These animals, without exception, came in pairs, preparing to take refuge in the ark. 3 days later, God would send an unprecedented disaster to destroy the greedy humans. The animals' journey was to find sanctuary in the ark Noah had built. To conserve food, Noah's family developed a herbal sleep potion to put all the animals into a deep sleep before quickly bringing them onto the ark. But on that day, while collecting supplies in the forest, Cain's descendants, the ones who had killed Noah's father, appeared. They had heard about the coming disaster and now wanted to board the ark. But Noah, unable to ignore or forgive the murderer of his father, faced a dilemma. Worse, the descendants of Cain arrogantly believed it was their right to board the ark. Noah refused Cain's descendants' request and told them that the disaster was coming soon. and their arrogance would not last much longer. Cain's descendants attempted to force their way onto the ark, but with the stone giant's protection, they had no chance. They could only leave, still threatening Noah. It seemed like Noah's family had avoided the immediate danger, but the real crisis had always been quietly approaching. Noah had high expectations for his eldest son Shem, and the pressure of overseeing the ark's construction led Noah's second son, Ham, to feel overlooked and unimportant. Seeing his brother and Isla grow closer, while his parents leaned on each other, Ham felt increasingly isolated. After the incident with Cain's descendants, Ham began to question his faith in God and grew discontent with Noah's decisions. The final stages of the ark's construction continued, and the mammals, seemingly impatient, were now ready to board. Noah welcomed them aboard, then used the sleep potion to put the animals to sleep, preparing them for the flood. Meanwhile, Cain's descendants were far from idle. After being scared off by the stone giants, they started leading their own group of marauders, burning, killing, and plundering. They forged weapons and gathered an army, preparing to confront Noah and take the ark for themselves. Back in the forest, Isla found Noah, who was still working, and urged him to find a more suitable woman for Shem. Since Isla had lost her ability to bear children due to an injury when she was younger, she knew that Shem loved her. She didn't want him to sacrifice the continuation of his line for love. But for Noah, Isla was like a daughter. She was the most precious gift God had given their family. Noah told her that, although he was Shem's father, he didn't mind that Shem might not have children. After all, love was often more important than procreation, but Isla couldn't accept this. After hugging Noah, she turned and left. As the day of the disaster approached, Noah was too busy to dwell on the matters between Shem and Isla. Putting those aside, he also needed to find wives for his other two sons, so they could face the coming trials together. For this purpose, Noah, after many years, ventured once more into human settlements. Noah was shocked by what he saw and heard. All around him were acts of violence, pleas for mercy, and cries of despair. The descendants of Cain had arrived, burning, killing, looting, and committing unspeakable acts. The flames bore witness to the destruction of countless families, reflecting the filth behind humanity's true nature. As Noah rushed after them, he witnessed a horrifying scene. A girl was being treated as a commodity in exchange for food. In his dazed state, Noah briefly saw the serpent from the Garden of Eden. Without thinking, he fled back into the depths of the forest. Upon returning, he ordered everyone to complete the final tasks of the ark's construction by the end of the day. Ham, upset for not receiving a wife, grew resentful. During a confrontation, he and Noah had a clash. When Noah told Ham that he wasn't a real man and was still childish, Ham immediately ran off. Noah's wife couldn't understand why Noah had changed so much after just one trip. She found him and tried to comfort him, wanting to understand what had happened. Noah couldn't explain the events of the previous night. He coldly told his wife that all of humanity was filled with sin, and they were no exception. His wife, feeling helpless, was deeply troubled by Noah's lack of sympathy, not just for others, but even for their children. But Noah firmly believed that the time for sympathy and mercy had passed. It was now time for humanity to face God's punishment. Meanwhile, Ham had ventured to a human settlement, hoping to find a wife for himself. However, in his attempt to evade the army, he fell into a trench filled with corpses. Before he could figure out how to escape, he encountered a girl named Nile. Without asking why she was there, Ham offered her some of his food, noticing that she had been without food for a long time. After introducing themselves, Nile dropped her guard. Though they had only known each other for a short time, Ham felt that Nile was the woman he was destined to marry. Back in the forest, while searching for Ham, Isla encountered Noah's grandfather, Methuselah. Methuselah explained that since being saved, Isla had lived with Noah's family for 10 years, and could now be considered his great-granddaughter. Out of love for his younger family members, Methuselah decided to grant Isla his blessing. Using the last of his divine power, Methuselah restored Isla's ability to bear children. Not long ago, Noah's wife had a heated argument with Noah and had gone to see Methuselah in the cave, hoping that he could help their children, including Isla. After Methuselah completed the spell, Isla heard Shem's voice behind her. With the return of her fertility, she could now boldly accept Shem's love. The construction of the ark was nearing its final stages. Noah had just closed the door when suddenly, dark clouds filled the sky, and raindrops began to fall, intensifying by the moment. Everyone knew what this meant. Even Ham, who had been angry earlier, quickly took Nile and ran toward the ark. Meanwhile, the descendants of Cain, unwilling to wait for their doom, began to charge toward the ark. Under Cain's influence, the humans desperate for survival rushed toward the ark. intending to kill Noah and the giants and forcibly board the ark. During the frantic run through the forest, Niall was trapped by a hunter's trap. When Ham was at a loss, he suddenly spotted his father, Noah, nearby. However, seeing the approaching crowd, Noah had no choice but to abandon the rescue of Niall and forcibly pull Ham away to escape. In the chaos, Niall was tragically trampled to death by the crowd. Noah and Ham were separated in the ensuing rush, and death soon became the true test of one's ability to escape. The brainwashed crowd, led by Cain's descendants, soon reached the ark. To prevent humans from breaching the ark, the stone giants formed a line of defense in front of the ark. Ham was the first to break through the defense and enter the ark, followed by Noah. But soon, Cain's descendants arrived with their army, using newly forged weapons to tear down the defense. As the stone giants fell, they chose to fight to the death with humanity. This act of self-sacrifice earned the stone giants forgiveness from God, and they were redeemed, returning to the Garden of Eden. Seeing this, the other stone giants followed suit, sacrificing themselves to atone for their actions. As the golden light of redemption began to shine down from heaven, it lit up the forest above. Earlier, when Samyaza had exploded, it had sent Cain's descendants flying away, but the explosion had inadvertently opened a path for them. When the descendants of Cain regained consciousness, they saw the entrance to the ark. At this point, he had forgotten his earlier arrogance and quietly climbed the wooden framework to sneak inside. Although Ham had seen Cain's descendant enter, he remained silent, choosing to conceal this from his father. As all the stone giants were redeemed, the ground beneath them suddenly shook. The Creator's punishment for humanity had officially begun. In an act of divine retribution, the Creator caused numerous springs to burst forth from the earth. Some who had managed to board the ark were swept away by the flood before they even had time to rejoice. Thankfully, when the floodwaters began to rise, Noah held onto a rope, preventing himself from being swept away by the sudden attack. Soon, the land became an ocean, and darkness and fire replaced the light. The ark began to serve its purpose, aimlessly drifting. However, Noah and his family couldn't ignore the cries for help coming from the flood. Noah's eldest son, Shem, and his mother stood on the same side, wanting to use ropes to try to rescue others, since the ark still had enough space. But Noah adamantly refused, remaining calm and indifferent. The reason for his cold-heartedness was clear. He fully understood his mission and was willing to sacrifice everything for it, even if it meant bearing the wrath of others. That evening, as the family sat down to eat, the meal felt tasteless to everyone. Ham was upset with his father, and the others didn't understand Noah's decisions. Noah, fully aware of their thoughts and not knowing how long the flood would last, decided to take this opportunity to tell his family the story of creation. He began by explaining that before creation, there was nothing, only infinite darkness and silence. It was only when God said, "Let there be light," that the world began to form. Next, land and water emerged. The land gave birth to green life, and the waters teemed with marine creatures. After 7 days, the world became what it was now. Then God created Adam and Eve, the ancestors of humanity, but they couldn't resist the serpent's temptation. Eating the forbidden fruit and losing their innocence, God cast Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden and decreed that their descendants would have to atone for their sins. This led to the current state of the world. Noah told his wife and children that after the disaster, everything would start over, but humanity would no longer be part of the world. As for the family structure, which Ham had previously not understood, it had been ordained by God long ago. Shem and Isla would bury Noah and his wife, while Ham would bury Shem and Isla. After Ham's burial, the youngest son would be the last human on earth. In the end, dust would return to dust, and humanity would vanish from the world, leaving only God to enjoy the solitude and beauty of peace. After telling his family this, Noah expressed deep regret for not saving Niall. Ham did not accept or understand Noah's words, and so he left. He went to the top of the ark, where he found Cain's descendant who had secretly snuck aboard. He told him that he was willing to help, as long as he could avenge Niall. Poor Noah had no idea that his own son would betray him. Meanwhile, Isla, under Methuselah's blessing, had successfully conceived a child with Shem. But when they told Noah, the grandfather, the news, he responded with anger. Upon hearing that his wife had secretly gone to see Methuselah, Noah was enraged and questioned why she would betray God. Things had reached this point, and Noah didn't know what to do. He could only go to the deck of the ark, hoping that God would give him guidance. Though there was no immediate answer, it seemed as if Noah had reached some sort of agreement with God. Soon, the rain stopped, and the family gathered on the deck. Noah then conveyed God's message to Isla. He told her that once she gave birth, If the child was a girl, Noah would not hesitate to kill her, but if it was a boy, the child would take the place of the 3 sons as the last human. The family was stunned by Noah's words, but they had no other choice but to feel powerless and angry. After all, they had grown up with Noah's authoritative nature. As time passed, Isla's due date drew nearer. When the bird Noah had released returned without any mud on its claws, it meant that the floodwaters had not yet receded, and the land had not appeared. The food inside the ark could last for another month, and Noah's wife could only comfort Isla, telling her not to worry. Watching Noah's figure, Isla felt uneasy and fearful. To protect her unborn child, Isla and Shem decided to secretly leave the ark. Noah's wife had also approached him, begging him to abandon what he believed was the right thing and not punish an innocent child. But Noah remained obstinate, believing that no matter the reason, they should not defy God's will. He reminded his wife that their ancestors, Adam and Eve, were examples of the consequences of disobedience. Seeing she could not persuade him, his wife finally voiced her long-held frustration. "I am willing to share in your suffering, but this I cannot forgive." Though Noah had never heard his wife speak this way, he still did not yield, holding on to his unwavering faith. Elsewhere, Cain's descendant had successfully persuaded Ham. Through a gap in the ark's planks, he saw Isla, and he believed the time was right. He told Ham to lead Noah to him, so he could deal with him personally. He handed Ham a knife. At first, Ham hesitated, but after a few words from Cain's descendant, he was pulled into the plot to kill his own father. Meanwhile, Noah discovered that Shem and Isla were planning to escape. Without hesitation, he burned the small boat they had built to escape and cut the ropes that held it. Shem didn't understand why his father would do this and began to argue and resist. Isla, overwhelmed by emotions, went into labor early. Noah's wife had no choice but to support Isla into the cabin, comforting her and preparing to help her give birth. Waiting for the child to be born were not only the father, Shem, but also Noah, who was eager to know the outcome. Seeing Shem holding a weapon and glaring at him, Noah was filled with mixed emotions. At that moment, Ham appeared, claiming that animals were fighting each other, and tricked Noah into going to the lower deck. Noah, not suspecting anything, followed Ham, only to be ambushed by Cain's descendant. They quickly became entangled in a fight, and Ham, holding the knife, stood by, ready to strike. Soon, the sound of a baby's cry came from above the twins. 2 girls had been born. Recalling his father's earlier words, Shem decided that, in order to protect his daughters, he would kill his father, Noah. Just as he was about to strike, a dispute broke out between him and Cain's descendant. Both of them believed that Noah's life belonged to them. However, in the final, critical moment, Ham, who initially seemed to have turned against his father, stood by Noah's side and, using the knife given to him by Cain's descendant, ended his life. Once the surrounding chaos settled, Ham told his father the name of Nile. In the end, Ham chose not to commit patricide. Upon reaching the upper deck of the ark, Noah learned from his wife that Isla had given birth to twin daughters. Recalling his agreement with God, Noah took a knife and climbed to the top of the ark. But looking at the peaceful sleeping faces of the 2 children and hearing Isla sing the familiar lullaby, Noah couldn't bring himself to go through with it. He gently kissed the 2 children and then turned to leave. It was at that moment that the white dove returned with an olive branch, a symbol of hope. No one knew how long they had drifted on the sea, but soon after the sign of hope appeared, they successfully reached land. Because of his earlier insistence, many human lives had been sacrificed, including Ham's love, Nile, and the twin granddaughters who almost died by his own hand. Noah could not forgive himself. He couldn't accept that he had betrayed God's will. Caught between these conflicting emotions, Noah chose to live in isolation, distancing himself from his family. Watching his brother's love and family come together, Ham felt both envy and regret. He couldn't forget the girl who had suddenly appeared in his life, only to quietly vanish. So, after leaving behind the holy relic he had taken from Cain's descendant, he packed his things, said goodbye, and walked into the unknown, alone. This departure only deepened Noah's pain and guilt. Seeing the relationship between father and son deteriorate, the empathetic Isla sought out Noah. Though she had been angry before, everything seemed to fade away after Noah kissed the children. All the old grudges were gone. Isla wanted to know why Noah had spared the 2 children. To her surprise, Noah answered simply, because of love. He explained that, upon seeing the 2 children, he suddenly realized that they had awakened a long-buried love deep within his heart. When Isla asked Noah why he chose to live alone, his response was, "I'm sorry." Immediately, Isla told him that he was wrong. She then revealed the true reason why God had chosen him. Through Isla's guidance, Noah finally understood his mission. Though the journey had been imperfect, he had ultimately completed his task and passed God's test. With clarity now in his heart, Noah returned to his wife's side. Finally, he took the holy relic passed down from the Seth family and, following his father's example, returned the innate right and responsibility to his two granddaughters, who were still in their cradles. As the ceremony concluded, the dark clouds above the sky dispersed, and vibrant sunlight spread like waves across the land. It was the promise of eternal hope. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.